Microphones are on. We are live.
Hi, folks. Wood is good. So our topic tonight, welcome to our online workshop, by the way. I'm sorry. Our Saturday night live is what we call it. I'm confused. Also, our fundraiser for Purple Heart Project. We'll tell you about that a little bit later. Short staff tonight. We're in COVID, not lockdown, but one stage below that. Even though we don't have anybody in the hospital, but we're being good. I was at the last minute, we're looking around gathering up some stuff to show you in terms of wood, maybe spark some questions, but hopefully it'll happen anyway. Also got some correspondence in the last couple of weeks in the mail that I want to share with you, some really good stories, and I got a piece of furniture that I restored that I'll give you some history on. Take a quick peek. That's a big bench. I'm sorry, desk. Jake's behind the camera. Frick's behind the problems.
It's a big ash desk.
Big ash desk. That's what that is. That's a big ash desk. And that's not being nasty. And I'm Rob. We've got Luther on here answering questions for you as well. I think Super Dave is with us.
He is.
I know Ken's on. He's at home. And Mark Smith is probably on. And Tony Brahadur. So, do we have a question, or do I need to do some of this first? Okay, so while they're organizing their questions, let me just... Jake, over here. So, I got a very nice Christmas card. Jake, you gotta stay with me. Trying to do two things at once. From Angie and Lynn. You see that on there? Thank you, Ange. I'll keep that card right up here with your picture. Angie, in case you don't know, is Ken's cousin, and she and her sister put together all of our t-shirts. So if you order a Purple Heart t-shirt, any one of the three, Wood is Good, Wood Doing Good, and Wood for Good, it'll come nicely packaged, and there'll be a little picture of Angie and I and her seal of approval on there. Thanks, Ange. Also received a challenge coin from Terry Nicholson, and this challenge coin, it represents all the veterans of all of the branches of the military in Georgia. So thank you very much, Terry. I'll actually take that out right now. In case you don't know what challenge coins are, and I didn't until recently, I say in the last 3 or 4 years, it is a military thing, and I don't know how you can actually describe it. Actually, Luther, would you give me a good description of what a challenge coin is? I have several that I have been given over the years from the various vets that have taken our class, and I have room for more. Well, I got to put some more slots in there. Actually, I got to make a wider slot. That one doesn't. Oh, there it is. It fits in the back. We'll find it a spot right there. Thank you. Also, Rick Owens. Rick is a World War II, Vietnam vet, Marines, 26. I don't know how much of this he wants me to read publicly, but I will just say thank you, Rick. Appreciate it, and it'll find spot on my apron. Tony Brahadur, who is a combat wounded vet local, was accepted to our program for 2020, but of course COVID took care of that. So we've moved him ahead to another class. But Tony actually now works with us, comes down and works twice a day, possibly 3 times a day.
A week, you mean?
A week. Yes, thank you. Yeah, well, he's so fast. He does it. It seems like he's here. Anyways, fantastic help. He's home actually putting stuff together right now. So he brings his sewing machine with us, and he will sew this on for me.
And today is?
And today's his birthday. Happy birthday, Tony. 29 years. Actually, I think he's 42. Now, I also received this patch from New York City. This is the original fire station in New York City. And I apologize, I forgot the letter that goes with it. So if you're here and watching tonight, would you please email me so that I'll remember, put your name alongside of that. And Also found very touching. Had a donation that I received from, let's get his name right, Bill Hens. I actually spoke to him on the phone. And this is the patch that came off of Bill's father's uniform. And he served in Korea, total of 37 years in the military. And he tells a very touching story about his cousin who was Vietnam, killed in action, body not recovered. Anyways, it's a real touching story. It's too long to read to you, and I don't have permission to read it publicly, but I want to acknowledge receiving this and also this bracelet in memory of his cousin who never returned. So, thank you.
I got a response from Luther
On
the coin.
challenge coin, yeah, read it
Yep.
for me, please.
Okay, he says, it's a coin giving for outstanding performance. You keep it on you always. If you meet the person who gave it to you, they can challenge you by showing the coin. If you have your coin, the challenger buys the drinks. If you don't have your coin, you buy the drinks.
Okay. Thank you, Luther. One more thing I wanted, I received this email, and this came from Paul Testoni, Testoni. I didn't speak to him, so Testoni. And Paul was a medic with fire department, 30-year retired medic from the city fire department, a large city of Rhode Island. And in this email, it's too long to read to you, but he talks about how he had a severe accident in his shop, and he lost a finger and index finger and thumb, and doctors couldn't save it. And that's depressing. I know it would be for me. But through watching our online watching this and our YouTube videos, it's motivated him to get back into the shop and use hand tool and get into hand tools. And he just talks about everything that we know from teaching vets, how therapeutic it is, how calming it is. And we watch in a week, literally lives change before our very eyes. These guys come in stressed out. I think one of the greatest examples I saw was, help me, Jake, please. Louisiana, not Louisiana, Mississippi.
Oh, Pete.
Pete, we picked him up at the airport, and he was just a shell. He couldn't get in. And during the course of the week, Pete opened up, and I know it's affected his life at home for the better. And now he's an awesome woodworker. And we have, every once in a while, we get something special in the mail from him. So it's fantastic. So I'll just tell you a little quick about what we do. In a normal circumstance, 6 times a year, we now run a 6-day class. We start at 7:30 in the morning. We go until 11 o'clock at night. This is going to be hosted in our new shop, which we're working on, which I think will host our next Saturday Night Live. Will be hosted from over there. We bring these guys in we bring 7 at a time along with 7 civilians. And during that 6 days, we teach them just about everything there is about hand tools. How to sharpen, how to cut dovetails, how to cut mortise and tenon, how to process wood by hand, and so they can actually build a small piece of furniture that they can take home. We send them home with a complete kit, all the stones, chisels, saws, planes. Totals up to about $3,500 or more US. And thanks to our bench brigade, headed up by Jack Lane down in Texas, every vet will have a bench waiting for them at home, so they can literally walk from this shop into their shop and go right to work. So we do that for 6 times 7, 42 combat wounded vets. Doesn't matter where you're from. We've had them from Australia, Ash down in Australia. We've had 4 Canadians, the rest were Americans, but we accepted them from all over. And we cover all the expenses, airfare, hotel, meals. I have no idea what's going to happen going forward as I'm explaining this. Very disappointing. We are seriously looking at a way of trying to do this virtually, at least to bridge the gap between now and when we can bring people back in. So these guys that have been waiting, we're looking at a program where we'd be able to do it, send them the tools, send them their bench, and teach them maybe a couple of days each week until we get it covered. Haven't got all the logistics figured out yet. We have no idea what's going to happen. Don't know when the borders are going to be opened. Anyway, that's where your money goes if you're supporting us, and we certainly appreciate it. And the generosity has been phenomenal. Any questions yet, Frick?
Yep.
All right, so throw a question, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about who sponsors tonight, Santa Claus and his wife, and what we're giving away tonight. And go ahead, Frick.
Okay, first question comes from Andrew Spencer in
Hi, Andrew.
El Paso, Texas.
El Paso.
And he says, how do you compensate for wood movement in a drawer bottom, specifically in the size of the dado for the bottom, especially if we're using dimensionally stable plywood for the bottom?
Well, I don't understand that question.
I assume when he says dado, he means groove.
Groove, yeah. But he talked about allowing for expansion, and now he's talking about using plywood. Frick, I'm going to ask you to read the question again, please, in case I missed something.
Okay, he says, how do you compensate for wood movement in a drawer bottom?
Okay, stop right there. We're going to do this in phases. So I'm going to pull this drawer out. And I'm going to grab another drawer. So we have a couple of examples. Jake, point there right here. Got it? By the way, if our shop looks neat and clean, thank Tony. Okay, so here are two examples of drawers. Both beautiful dovetails. This one has plywood. This one has solid wood. Let's look at the plywood one first. Then I prefer to build my drawers. And by the way, in case you want to get caught up on this, we are currently doing a series on YouTube on drawer making. We've posted the first two. This is the drawer that we're actually doing. So the next video, which we haven't filmed yet, is going to be fitting this to the opening. But here's what you do, and I always add the drawer last. And the reason is, in fitting this drawer, what I'll do, and I know this is taking it a little farther down the road than you're asking, I would take a piece of 1-inch MDF and I would clamp it on my bench, and that allows me to, look at that, almost, oh well. It allows me to slide my drawer on there like that, and now it's well supported, and I can plane front to back on both sides until I get that to fit, as opposed to having a drawer bottom in there that would interrupt that. When I'm done and the drawer has been fit, I cut my bottom and I slide it in. Now a dado, just so we get our terminology right, a dado is a groove or a trench or a housing that is cut across the grain. A groove is also a trench, and it's cut parallel to the grain. So this is a groove, and if it was this way, it would be called a dado. So I have a groove cut on the side, on the front, and on the opposite side. When I'm ready, I'll take my drawer at bottom and I will slide it in, and I will typically, I'm answering your question in a long roundabout way, but it's also good information. It's really critical, or it can be, to make these grooves so that the bottom of them are uniform front to back. In other words, if it's 1/8 of an inch deep there, it's 1/8 of an inch deep over the entire length of the side, same thing on both sides. Then I would take my drawer bottom, if I'm using plywood, I would make it so that it literally bottoms out. So I would measure from the bottom of this groove to the bottom of that groove, and that's how I would cut my drawer bottom. And I would slide it in there, and then I would glue it in the front one. And in gluing it in the front one, and it's bottomed out on both sides, this drawer cannot rack like that, because I will also secure the drawer bottom like so. I don't have to worry about movement on this because it's plywood. So it's fastened here and here, glued in place, and that prevents that thing from moving. Very, very solid construction. Now, I like to do my drawer bottoms out of solid wood. Now this one is full of, this is a great example of woods too for tonight. Let me just take some of these out. We have this guy in Southern California that he has an illness, and he keeps sending us wood, drawer chisel handles. And we finally talked him into sending us enough that we're going to be able to offer them for sale. He's got that same wood disease that I have. Can't get enough of it. We'll play Stump the Dummy a little later tonight with Jake and see if he can name all of these. Sorry, I didn't have my prop ready. Okay, so now we're dealing with solid wood. The grain runs this way. So we know that the board, whether wet or dry, is not going to get any longer, but it will get wider. And by the way, in case you're wondering, this is unfinished. It's right off of the scrub plane. And in older furniture, since this wouldn't be seen and that wouldn't be seen, they wouldn't waste the time hand planing and smoothing this or smoothing the back, only the surfaces that you saw. So I decided to leave mine that way as well. So this drawer bottom, grain runs this way. Only expansion is going to be it'll get wider and in damp seasons, and it'll shrink in dry seasons. But we do the same thing. We glue it into the front groove. We bottom it out along the sides. We fasten it here, but you'll see that I've cut a little notch, and there's 2 screws, and those little notches will allow, we don't put the screw right at the back, we put it in the middle so that there's enough room for that to move one way or the other. It has to be glued here so that when that movement occurs, it pulls in under here instead of exposing a gap by accidentally pulling this out of the groove. The fact that it's bottomed out along here, again, prevents any racking of the drawer, makes for very solid construction. And I just think a solid wood bottom is the better of the two. Not the more convenient, but the better of the two. So if you're building fine furniture, and I didn't on that, but I've progressed. Read the rest of that question, Frick, just in case we didn't cover it all.
He said, specifically in the size of the dado for the bottom, especially if we're using dimensionally stable plywood.
Okay, so you'll see on this, whether you're using plywood or solid wood, you don't have any movement to worry about this way. So this groove does not need to be very deep. Now, if you can come in on close on this, please, Jake. Just let me, I need a
Pointer.
Pointer. Oh no, I don't want a pencil. It's because I don't want to get ink. Okay. By the way, we're giving away gifts tonight. So for every $1,000 increment in donations we receive, we're giving away, remember the beautiful half-blind dovetail chisel that Ahmed made the handles for. Where are they, Jake?
They're out there on your...
Okay, we'll get them. We'll get them and show you. And we also have T-shirts to give away and a hoodie and a dead cat sweater. Okay, look at this. So I've cut a groove in this sidewall. The deeper I cut this groove, if I brought it way back here, yes, it would have more area to hold the bottom, although unnecessarily, but it ends up leaving a very small amount of wood here. So that bottom section of the drawer side is very unsupported with that little bit of wood. So I don't make a very deep groove here at all. If this drawer is, I think it's 3/8 of an inch. No, it's 7/16. So on a 7/16 drawer side, I made that groove 1/8 of an inch deep, and that is plenty. You don't need any more than that for the reason that I just explained. Go ahead, Frick, what's the rest of that question?
That was the whole question.
That was the whole thing? Okay, give me another one, please.
Okay, this one comes from John Kesarowski.
Hi, John.
He says, is there a way to detect case hardening without cutting into a board?
No, I don't think so. Case hardening, it's my understanding is case hardening is a fault of the drying. They've dried it too fast. And it shrinks, it really kind of weird how it happens, but you cut into it and all of a sudden you've got all of these, it's almost like a honeycomb effect that's taking place in the board. It doesn't show through on the surface, but it's in on the inside and the wood is essentially ruined. So a lot of people decide they're going to make their own kiln, but you really need to know what you're doing and to avoid ruining your lumber. Next
one. This one comes from Benji in the chat. He says,
Benji.
How do you edge join boards? How do you edge join boards to compensate for expansion and contraction?
Edge join?
Maybe it means joint. I don't know.
No, edge join.
Yeah.
Edge join
Edge,
bug,
edge
yeah.
glue.
Well, Benji, you really don't have to worry about that because expansion and contraction. Okay, so let's go through the basics on this again because I think some people may still be confused about this. Let me just clear my bench. By the way, Jake and I shot a YouTube today, or we finished it today, and I thought you might like this. And it's on the through wedge tenon.
Don't spoil it.
What?
Yeah, stop.
Don't spoil it.
Don't throw what?
Just tell them.
you
Just
mean?
tell them.
Oh,
Then it's
yeah. Okay,
about-
so we did that. Sorry. Yeah, it hasn't posted yet, so I guess I can't show it to you. Oh, you guys, sticklers.
Got to build the hype.
All right. So here we have a piece of wood. This is a piece of cedar. Now this board, I'm going to be real basic. This board stood in the tree like this. Okay?
Frick, you paying attention?
Yeah, frick. So if you look at the end of it, based on these rings, now where do the rings come from? Well, this wide ring is the growth that the tree incurred during the spring when there was lots of moisture. This narrow band right here was growth occurred during the summer when it was dry. And there was
Wait.
no... Hello?
Summer was the small ring.
Pay attention, Jake.
Okay, go ahead.
Summer ring, not much moisture, smaller growth. Spring, lots of moisture,
Oh, okay.
larger growth. And then nothing occurs in the winter, so then it cycles again. So each one of these represents 1 year in the life of the tree. And if you look at them based on that radius, the center of the tree was probably about here. So how big is that tree? Well, yeah. So and the brown, you see how this is brown and then this starts to get white. So typically, with few exceptions, this is heartwood. So this part of the tree is essentially dead, and this is sapwood, the white. And that's the part the moisture, the nutrients still flow up and down the tree. So the sapwood is usually not a very big part of the tree, so I would guess and say that the bark was probably sitting maybe out here and over here somewhere. So it's not a huge tree. But this is a piece of northern white cedar, stands like that. Now, depending on the way it's cut, it'll affect the shrinkage rates a little bit. But this board, once dry, and dry means somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8% moisture content. What's that mean? That means that board, 6 to 8% of the weight of that board is moisture that is actually still in the board. So if we put it in an oven and we cooked it and got it down to no moisture at all, that would be the weight of the actual wood. And then as it would start to gain moisture from the air, because like a sponge, if the moisture content in here is 8%, that's not going to sit there at zero for very long. It's going to start sucking moisture in from the surrounding atmosphere, and it would get a little bit heavier. So if it gains moisture, what's going to happen? Well, that board is going to expand. It's going to get a little bit wider.
It's going to swell.
Swell. It's not going to get any longer. It's still going to be 30 inches long. But if it's 7 5/16 right now, it might get up to 7.5 inches. Now, Bruce Hoadley wrote a book called Understanding Wood. He died not that long ago, and it's a great book in reading up on this stuff. Now, we're dealing with furniture, so we're going to deal with lumber that is probably anywhere from 6 to 9% moisture content. Depending on what areas of the country you live, some areas like Arizona, Utah, you're going to be down in the lower side. And then if you're living in Maine or anywhere on either coast, you're probably going to be on the higher side, 9%. I don't think too many houses are going to have wood inside that would be 10%. So all you really need to worry about is how much is this going to swell in going from 6% in, say, January to 9% in September. And different woods will swell at different rates. And in his book, it'll tell you so that you can judge that. And that means when you're building something, you'll know what you can compensate, how much you need to compensate for, or what you need to allow. So when I built this drawer, with a solid wood bottom, I didn't want I didn't want at some point for that bottom to shrink so much that this comes in beyond the screws and you now have a gap down there, nor do I want it to expand so it goes up beyond the screws and causes a problem and pulls the screws out or does some twist the drawer. So you can find a wood, you can find the name of the wood, find out how much it's going to move seasonally and figure it out because they'll give it to you in feet. So if it's 1 foot wide, going from this moisture content to that, here's how much it's going to move. And it's a pretty good gauge. There's not a huge amount of difference from one species to another. A lot of movement when it's going from, say, 20% down to 6 or 8%, but once it's there, there's not a whole lot. What was the answer? What was the question?
I don't know.
Gluing 2 panels together.
Oh, all right. So back to what we're talking about. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So it's not going to get any longer. It's going to get wider and narrower. It's also going to get thicker and thinner. So it'll absorb moisture this way, and it'll absorb moisture and move this way, but not in its length. So if you're gluing 2 boards together because you want a wider panel, here's a good example. Here's some Douglas fir. If I was going to glue, if I needed a really wide piece, now the grain is running this way, I could glue as many pieces together as I want. I don't have to worry about any kind of movement. That's all just going to keep expanding and contracting. If you're talking about gluing something together like this, where you're gluing, this is cross-grain construction, now you're going to have an issue. But typically we don't do that. We don't glue this onto that. If we had to glue these 2 pieces together, we have to use some kind of a joint that will allow for a little bit of seasonal expansion.
Oh. Now, you could put those 2 pieces together if you were doing a tenon, a mortise and tenon.
Yeah.
And you would compensate for that by making a slightly larger mortise.
Yeah, so your mortise, the square, I don't even know if this is what he's asking about, but your mortise would be, let's say that that was your mortise. Well, you would make it so that your tenon was a little bit short of that and had a little bit of room to expand. You just have to avoid joining pieces like that where you have too much width here. You get into trouble. When we build our doors, you know, the stile, which is the part that runs up and down, the rail is what I meant to say. The rail, typically you keep it anywhere somewhere 2 to 3 inches. And at that amount, you're not, remember, if you got a piece of wood that's 3 inches wide and your expansion is only going to be, you're going to have to worry about it expanding from more typically maybe 8% to 9%. Well, that's such a small amount, it really doesn't, almost don't have to factor it in. But the wider it is, the more that becomes an issue. When you build a breadboard end, like I build a big pine table for our house, and it's 42 inches wide, and I put breadboard ends on it. Breadboard ends is where you have your table, your boards are running like this, and at the end, just to hide the end grain is the only reason they did it. They put a piece on like that. Well, you have to allow for that seasonal expansion in there. You can't glue it and make it fast. And I did it in such a way that there was a big tenon on the end. Then there was a long slot cut in this, call it a mortise if you want, and then it's pinned on the underside. And it's pinned in the middle, and then it's pinned all along the edge, but the pins go into a hole like this. And the pin might sit right here, which keeps it nice and tight, but it also allows it to move. Got to factor all that stuff in. Cross-grain construction is a big deal. If you don't pay attention to it, your furniture is not going to survive the years. And everybody has seen a piece of antique furniture that has come apart. And a lot of times it's because of cross-grain construction. Frick, next.
Okay. Jesse Widener in the chat, he says, I have an outdoor workshop that can get very cold in the winter and hot in the summer. Is there any wood that handles the temperature change better than others?
Go to Bruce Hoadley's book, and he'll give you a list. All the common species are on there, and he'll tell you what woods are going to move the least. But you're creating the worst possible situation in having a shop that is unheated. Because if it's unheated, that means it's going to be subject to the moisture fluctuations. If you think about in your house, you keep the temperature at 68 to 70 degrees all the time. And although your humidity is going to fluctuate a little bit, not to the extreme that not having a heated house would create. I'll give you a quick example of something like this. I did a kitchen for a friend, chap that I met. Kitchen took me 16 months to build. It's all made out of cherry, all solid wood. And his cousin was probably the best finish carpenter that I've ever worked around. And all the moldings, this house was designed to be fit in with the area, which is Victorian, so a lot of big, wide moldings. And if you miter, if your trim around a window is wide and it's mitered, well, as soon as that starts to shrink, that miter is going to open up a gap. And I had told him, I said, if you're going to do all this work in this house, you need to control the humidity. It's not enough just to control the temperature. You need to control the humidity. And don't think he really believed me. But within the first year, I was still working on the kitchen. All of a sudden, these big, wide moldings around the windows started to open up on the inside. So as it shrinks and pulls away, you end up with a gap in there. So then he went in, he had humidifier and dehumidifier installed so that it would remain constant throughout the year. Ideally, that's what you want in your shop. If you don't have that, I almost say good luck. But what woods are going to survive more than the others? I don't think there's any wood you're going to find that are going to not move enough to endure those circumstances.
Super Dave says, only 16 months? Must have just been 2 drawers in a cabinet.
Oh, he's a funny guy. Oh, and there's so many unemployed comedians. Go ahead, Frick. Actually, stop right there. Let me show you something. So, speaking of drawers, back in 1988 was my last year at BYU. I decided to build myself a desk. And my job at BYU, and I studied, I have a degree in Bachelor of Science in Industrial Education at Brigham Young University. So the program is there to teach shop teachers, high school shop teachers, or produce high school shop teachers. So they had an automotive shop, they had metal, they had woodworking, and I went there simply for the woodworking side of it, as well as business administration and furniture design. I studied under Milo Bothman and Del Nish. And I got hired to be the shop assistant and then the teaching assistant, so I had the keys. And I could find Dale's stash. Dale loved wood, and he would travel the world and he'd bring stuff home, and he'd have it hidden everywhere, but I'd find it. And I found this big piece of ash, huge piece of ash. It was actually wider than this. I'm going to show you all the details on this. Let me grab my tape. This is, I remember cutting the dovetails in this. So you can imagine trying to cut dovetails on this piece when it stood up. It's 61 inches long, and it is 21 inches wide. That's one solid piece. It was a lot wider than that. But if you look down on this corner down here, Jake, it had been infested, and there's some cracks in here, and I'll tell you why. This was in an accident. See these holes? This is powder post beetles, and if you look up underneath, it's even worse. And I had to cut off as much of it as I could and still maintain what I wanted for the desk. And powder post beetles love ash, and they'll destroy the wood. And this, they were still...
Ash is being attacked by something else, too.
Yeah, that's that Chinese beetle. That's just wiping up. Oh, the ash trees in North America are being eliminated because of it. It has no natural predator. It came in on a pallet. So everything that comes into the country made of wood has to be treated. Nobody thought about treating the pallets. So it came in, pallet was infested. That's the story I've heard. Anyway, so I found this big piece of ash. It had some defects in it. There's some cracks in it. There was a knot right there that I filled with epoxy. But I built this desk. The sides were out of solid walnut. So to cut those dovetails, no problem cutting the tails, but cutting the pins and having this thing standing up on end, I had it propped up. I was standing on top of a bench, and I had it all jigged up so that it would hold it solid, and I could stand on top of the bench and cut them. It was hard. That was a big cut to make. I did it all with hand tools.
Emerald ash beetle.
Emerald ash. beetle, yeah. Not welcome here. Anyway, so I loved the contrast at the time, actually still do. It has through wedge tenons. So these drawer cabinets, for lack of a better word, they're made out of ash and walnut as well, so you can see the dovetails down there. Again, I kept everything proportional. And then this side fits in a dado, so it's a long groove that's cut all the way across the board. But remember, the wood is going to move this way, and the walnut is going to move that way as well. So there's not enough difference in the expansion and contraction of the two different species to worry about it. But in order to lock it in place, there's 4 through wedge tenons. So that comes all the way up. It's a wedge-shaped opening, so it's wider here once the wedges are driven down than it is at the bottom, and that holds it in place. And then I just cut recesses here for your hands, so you reach up underneath. So underneath each drawer is a little area where your fingers go. Sides are made out of poplar, ash plywood on the bottom. And the walnut that I used on the front was quarter-sawn walnut. I got that. They were backing boards. So it comes out of the center of the tree. So if you can imagine taking a board right through the middle of the tree, the grain is all going to run perpendicular to the face. That, by the way, is the most stable cut in terms of wood that's not going to move a lot. Now, and what I did on the back, I wanted a bench, I wanted a desk, sorry, I keep mixing up my words. I wanted a desk that looked good from this side and looked good from this side. So I duplicated what you see out there back here. So there's my ash dividers, and then I had kids, so that's why you see some pen marks on here. So this is a solid wood panel that's allowed to float. It's sitting in a groove all the way around, all 3 of them. And if you take this apart, and you can see the construction, if you look in here, maybe if I take this bottom one out too, you'll be able to get enough light in there. So, I'm having to take this from memory. That back piece of ash has a groove cut in it. And these looks like poplar, these runners, this is a frame. This is attached to here, this is attached to here, probably mortise and tenon, and glued in place. But I couldn't glue this to that, because if I did, we're into cross-grain construction. This is going to get expand and contract this way. This piece isn't. So this piece back here is fastened to the walnut side, so it's locked in place. And this piece is fastened here, but it has a tongue cut on the end of it that's sitting in that groove. And that will allow it to pull out or go in, depending on the season. And it's sitting in a groove in here as well, but dry fit, so that it allows for that movement. Now, having said all that, I took this to a furniture show in Halifax back in probably 1990. And I had rented a van in order to transport everything over. I came home late. I got home late on a Sunday night after the show was over. I had to have the van back Monday, 8 o'clock in the morning, or else I'd have to pay for another day. And back in those days, I had to make sure I was there by 8. Got home really late, got up really early. My boys were all too young to help. So I was carrying this. I was young and stupid. I'd taken the drawers out. I was carrying...
90, you didn't even have any boys.
That's right, too. Rex wasn't born until 91. He's always late. So I had just Erica and Krista. I was carrying this, I remember exactly. I had it up on my shoulder, took the drawers out, balanced it on my shoulder, and our house was under construction. We had built the house, but the yard hadn't been done. And we had a retaining wall that came out from the foundation wall. It was about 6 feet high at the top, and then it sloped on down. We were on the side of a hill. And one side was all mud, and then the other side was a crushed rock driveway. And the wall was an 8-inch wall, and I had that on my shoulder, and I was bringing it up to the front door, and I was walking up this retaining wall, and as I got right at the top, the wind blew just enough to knock me off balance. And I had a split second. Do I jump and try to save this? And fortunately, I was smart enough to realize, no, I'd break my back. So what I had to do to avoid end up landing on top of it, I had to throw the desk, which the force of doing that saved me from falling off. But this crashed down below 6 feet. That's heavy too. 6 feet down onto rocks, and that corner got knocked off. So you'll see a repair there I had to make. There's a chunk of wood missing here. There's a chunk of wood missing there. It broke the joints. It actually pulled these cabinets down through. There's a couple of them. That one is sunken in a little bit. This one is sunken in a little bit, you can see. And then I don't want to show you, but if you look up in, I've had to go in there and screw that. I probably let it sit for 2 or 3 years before I could get over the disappointment of actually working and fixing it. But these are thrown out of whack, so you see how that drawer is no longer lined up. They didn't fit like that when I made it. But I had to put screws in there, clamp it together, put cyanacrylate in there to secure it as best I could. Put screws up in there. I had to put screws all in here. That's why you'll see round plugs to pull that all back together. It really destroyed it. The only thing that didn't get destroyed were the drawers, because I had taken them out. I should not deliver my own furniture. I had more horror stories. Frick, question.
All right. Next question comes from the chat as well. It's from Cable, is his name?
A Cable?
I think I'm saying it right. Why do some solid wood panels cup, and how do you avoid that?
Okay. So, if you look at a piece of wood, I always want to say wood. We had a neighbor who was German, and he was a really good cabinet maker at one point, and he used to come over to the shop, and he'd always say wood. Who is it that came in, and one of the kids came in and asked him, what do you think of the wood? Mitch. What I'm trying to find is a piece of wood that will show you what will happen. So this stuff is all pretty much quarter-sawn. See how those rings are running almost perpendicular to the face? So this is going to stay pretty flat. That's probably not going to move at all. However, if we look at this piece of wood, do you see the rings? Okay, so the center of the tree is up here somewhere. Those rings always want to flatten out. So if that's left alone, and if there's any moisture in there, and it's going to move, it's going to cup like this. The rings have a tendency to want to flatten out. If the wood is nice and dry, and properly flattened and prepared, it shouldn't. You can stop it from doing it. It's not hard to straighten wood out. Here's a good example. This is not quite as easy as I thought. But I could easily affix something to this and prevent that from cupping. What I can't stop it from doing is expanding or contracting, but I can prevent it from cupping. So when you build a big drawer, this is what's so nice about dovetails. When you build a big drawer like that, now I don't like making big deep drawers. I just refinished that. I'm not going to set that on there. This was for files, but nobody uses it anymore. So this drawer is 10 and 3/16 of an inch wide. And that's a really skinny piece. Look how thin that is. Now, why does it not cup or move? Well, because the dovetail holds it straight, front and back. There's no way that can cup or bow. If you're building something, and well, here's another example. Here's the what did we say this was? 20 what? There's a piece that's 21 inches wide. Again, the dovetail will prevent that. That will not cup. The dovetail will keep it nice and straight. At the same time, it'll allow it to expand and contract. Over here, we have, well, here's a good example. Here we have a piece of birch. This is a solid panel, and this is about 10.5 inches wide. This solid panel is sitting in a groove, and the end of that panel sitting in that groove will allow it to move, expand and contract, but it'll keep it nice and flat. It won't allow it to cup. You can prevent wood from cupping. You just can't prevent it from expanding and contracting. You can put a batten. Some doors that were just a big slab of wood, they would have a batten. So it would be a piece of hardwood, usually, that was fastened, screwed on there. You got to allow for that expansion, but as long as you have some way of holding it tight, but still not restricting movement, you can keep it nice and flat and it won't move. Now, you want your wood to be dry before you flatten it. If you take a piece of wood that hasn't yet acclimated to your shop, let's say I bring this piece of wood in here and it's 11%, but everything else in my shop is 8%, and I flatten it, whether on a jointer or with hand tools, it's going to continue to move, dry out and acclimate, and probably cup. Also, when you're working with wood and you go home at the end of the night, if you lay it down like that, it's going to lose moisture more readily off of this area than it is off of this area. And that's going to cause it to cup like this, because this side will shrink, the other side hasn't, so it's going to cup up like that. So leave your pieces like that when you're not using them. That way they're losing moisture equally all the way around. No guarantees, but this is where you hedge your bet. Okay, next. This is more interesting than I thought. I was thinking, well, we're not going to give him any questions on this, but...
All right, next question comes from Bill Edis. He says, when creating a large piece, such as a tabletop, should you change the crown of each board to help in the expansion and contraction?
Absolutely not. Where's the chisel handles? The chisels on your bench?
No, they're in that next to the inspection table.
I gotta go get them because we're gonna show them. No, that's an old wives' tale.
Can't hear you.
Second.
We can't hear you.
What I'm looking for are two gorgeous chisels.
Can't hear anything.
Someone said
I
we should
remember
have
seeing
a
them, Jake, but I
arm
can't
wrestle,
find
Jake.
them.
Okay. Should I use my left hand against your right hand?
After holding that camera the whole time.
Sorry, I can't find them. What we have to give away tonight are two IBC half-blind dovetail chisels. That's not an IBC, but it looks like that. It's been ground so that it allows you to go in and clean out very efficiently the inside socket on a half-blind. The handles, which one did we give away? The Cocobolo? So one is as African Blackwood, and the other one handle looks exactly like that, and the other one is Pink Ivory, which is this one. So that's what we're giving away tonight. We'll draw at each $1,000 increment, we will draw and give away one of those. Okay, back to the question. What people used to do, and remember, if you went back 60, 70, 80 years, houses were not nearly as airtight as they are now. I mean, literally the wind would blow through them. Very little insulation. And nobody thought a whole lot about maintaining the humidity in your home. And as a result, things would move quite a bit. So what they used to do, and this really bothers me because I've got a great example, and hard to believe
It's
that
right there.
yeah, I know, I want to get one of the bigger wide ones. Hard to believe that people in my lifetime still subscribe to this. What's the word, Frick?
What?
What's the word when people believe something that... I said subscribe to it.
Is it prescribed?
I went to an auction at a furniture factory, about 12, 15 years ago. They had gone out of business, and I bought a whole bunch of wood. They had no idea what I was getting, didn't pay much for it. When I got it home, I found out, is that a good side for you to see?
Yeah.
That there was all of these bird's eye maple and
Fiddleback.
fiddleback panels. But look what they did. They cut all those boards into narrow strips and probably flipped the annual rings. So what he's talking about is, here's your piece of wood, nice wide panel, and typically you might have something that looks like this, one big wide piece. And they thought, okay, remember as I said, this wants to straighten out, so it's going to end up cupping like that. So what they would do to avoid it is they would take that piece and they would cut it into narrower pieces. So if you had rings running this way on this piece, then the next piece they would do this. And the next piece they would do this, and right on down. And the idea was that if one's going to cup this way, the next one's going to cup the opposite way. I'm not doing that the way I... Anyway, garbage. Wrecks it. Look at this ugly piece of wood. Instead of leaving just working with a dry piece, don't worry about the movement because, as I said, in today's homes, it's not going to be an issue. But I'm more interested in the aesthetic, the look of it, and something like this. You can prevent wood from cupping. You just have to, if you have strong corners, that's all you need. Whatever you join, however you join the vertical piece to the horizontal piece, as long as that's a strong joint, that's not going to cup. This is totally ridiculous to do this. Time consuming, and what a waste of some pretty wood. So I ended up buying all these, and all I can really use are just narrow strips because I cut it all up into pieces and utilize it that way. So don't do that to your wood, and anything you read is outdated. That does not apply to today. We control the humidity and the temperature in our homes far better. You don't have to worry about that. Frick, next.
Okay, next question comes from Joseph.
Hey, Joseph.
In Linden, Michigan. He says, what is your preference, kiln-dried or air-dried wood for hand tool woodworking?
Oh, good. Such good questions. Jake, have we got a piece of air-dried walnut?
No, not that I can't think of any.
Well, I'm going to answer that question. If I wish I had a piece that I could show you.
We do have that air-dried pine though. It's stinky stuff.
Air-dried pine. Oh yeah. Well, walnut's a great example. So when they cut walnut has a air-dried walnut has greens, purples, every shade of brown that you can think of. It is wild. It's beautiful wood. And I don't know if everybody agrees with me, but it has working properties that are so different than kiln-dried. It just, it planes beautifully, it chisels beautifully, it saws beautifully. Well, the problem is that if you had a tree that was that wide, because of the white sapwood, you probably lose that much on either side due to sapwood. And when people are buying walnut, sapwood is going to lower the grade. So what they discovered is if in the drying process, and I'm not an expert at this, but I'm just telling you what little I know. In the drying process, if they steam the wood, what it does is it bleeds some of that dark heartwood out into the sapwood. So instead of losing that much on either side, you might only lose that much on either side. So it gives you more higher yield based on absence of sapwood, but it takes away, it robs those really vibrant colors in the heartwood and tames them down to just a brown instead of having these really wild colors. I've made lots of stuff out of, I don't have anything here to show you, but I've made lots of stuff out of air-dried walnut, and it is fantastic. There's some downsides though, however. The working properties are better. The kiln-dried almost, case hardening was a good word because it does something to it. It just takes away the ease of working hand tools. The advantage of kiln-dried lumber is, number one, you know it's stable, at least as long as it's come from the kiln to you without sitting in somebody's damp warehouse. But it also, kiln-dried lumber destroys all of the bugs. That powder post beetle, that was air-dried, that piece of ash, because the air-dried stuff, you have to always worry about the bugs that are in it because obviously they're not going to die. So that's the advantage of kiln drying. But yes, I prefer air-dried. Frick.
Shall we say hi to some vets?
Yes.
Okay.
Who do we have? Oh boy, if you're a combat wounded vet that has been to one of our classes, we always love to acknowledge that you're here watching, and we'll give you a shout out if you'll just put on there when you email. Are we using the Megan tag?
Chat, yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah, chat.
Chat?
Not email, chat.
Chat.
Say it in the chat.
Say in the chat.
If you type the @ symbol and then start typing Megan's name, it'll come up.
So
And then-
Megan,
Yeah.
and then your name, and then we'll catch you.
And the
Who do we
cloud.
have?
So we have Bob Abbott,
Robert,
Philip Lawrence,
Robert Abbott, Phil Lawrence, Phil,
Paul Morrison,
Brother Paul.
Mark
Paul,
Smith.
where's Paul? He's on here,
Right there, the white one.
right here. Paul Morrison,
Said Mark.
Mark Smith,
Right there.
Mark
in the center.
Smith. Mark is right front and center.
Joe
Mark.
Bright,
Joe Bright.
Gary Burnett,
Joe Bright. Joe's down in Southern California.
Gary Burnett, and Pete.
Hey, Gary.
Pete
Oh,
Ambrose.
Pete Ambrose. Pete was the guy I was talking about in the beginning. How you doing, brother Pete? Hope everything is good down there.
That's it for now.
All right. Anybody else watching, please speak up. Go ahead, Frick.
All right. Where does my questions go? Another Joseph has a question in Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah.
Are there species of wood
Hi,
that
Joseph.
shouldn't be used together in drawer construction?
Species of wood that shouldn't be used together.
Yeah.
What?
Maple and mahogany.
For what reason?
They blend together.
Oh, you're thinking, oh, okay. Well, I don't think that's what he meant, but now that you bring it up. So, oh my goodness, Jake. Get stuck. My attitude is that if you're going to take the time to cut dovetails, it's nice that they be shown off due to the contrast of the heartwood and the sapwood. So when I did this
No, not end grain and long grain.
end grain,
You said heartwood and sapwood.
yeah, I didn't mean that. The end grain and the long grain of the two different woods. So when I built that little desk that little hall table that you didn't see, but I pulled the drawer out of, this was all done with hand tools, every bit of it. So there's mahogany on the back and mahogany on the front, and you can actually see the contrast. And I wanted the bird's eye maple to be on the front, and I said, okay, well, if I've got a light wood on the front, I need a dark wood for sides. That's the reason why I chose mahogany. But you can hardly see the dovetail. What I didn't think about was the end grain of the maple would be almost the same color as the face grain of the mahogany. And when you open that up at certain angles, you can't even tell that there's a dovetail there. So for those reasons, I would suggest that you choose wisely. You also have to remember that wood's color is going to change over time. So what you see a great contrast from today, you may lose. As far as drawer sides, you want a wood that, I don't think you want something that's really hard, because why go through all that extra effort? So I like to use a medium hard, and I'm not talking about deciduous coniferous. I'm talking about hard versus soft. So you want your drawer sides to be a wood that is relatively easy to work, but has good wearing properties. Poplar is a good one. Aspen is probably a little on the soft side, but it's a nice white wood, so it really contrasts well. Holly I used on that last piece I built, but it's way too expensive, so I wouldn't suggest that as your secondary wood. If you're going to use aspen and the drawers are going to be used a lot, then what you should probably consider doing is using what we call drawer slips. And a drawer slip is just a way of keeping the drawer light, but at the same time increasing the wear surface. So here's what I did. And just for color contrast, I used mahogany. So I glued this little piece onto here, so I have a lot more wear surface, double, but I don't want a great big fat drawer side. I like to have it nice and thin. I think it looks more elegant. So it stops right there, and the bottom actually fits into it, but it gives me that greater wear surface.
So now that's a case of mahogany on the front instead of. Oh, sorry, that's aspen. Never mind. I was thinking of maple.
I like to use woods that are aromatic. I think a nice wood for the drawer bottoms is pine's always a good one, but
Yellow cedar.
yellow cedar is gorgeous. It smells so nice, but it's so expensive. I mean, you have to win a lotto or two in order to afford it. I was going to say native, this one right here, native white cedar, or northern white cedar. It's really light. It has a bit of smell to it, although it doesn't last very long. But nicest thing about it is it's light, so you got a big wide bottom. Instead of having that increase the weight of your drawer by 7 or 8 pounds, it's really light. Next, Frick.
A couple more vets. Sean McDermott is here.
Hey, Sean.
Charlie Ray is here, of course.
Charlie.
Raymond Dorr.
Cool, Ray. I got a Christmas card from you and your wife. Oh, that's in the other room with a picture of the two of you and a little update on the family. Appreciate it. Very nice.
And Bill, Doc Bailey.
Bill. Haven't heard from Bill in a while. Bill was a corpsman, Vietnam.
Navy corpsman.
Attached to the Marines in Vietnam.
Okay. Question is from Northeast England. It comes from Herbie Grief.
Herbie in Northeast England.
He says, what is the best wood or wood properties for a beginner to hand tools to practice their skills and techniques?
Say that again, please.
What is the best wood or wood properties for a beginner to hand tools to practice their skills and techniques?
Oh, I got some good advice for you. So every once in a while, somebody isn't quite able to work my saw. Jake, I came down here looking for some of that styrofoam. Did it get thrown out? Are there any pieces left? The blue stuff?
Well, check the corner.
I just found it. So, how do you learn? Well, this northern white cedar, basswood, pine. What?
I think the cedar's too soft.
Wait a minute, sunshine. Okay. So if you get into a piece of really hard wood and you're just starting, here's a classic example. Here's a piece of white oak. An expression oft used here would be harder than a bull turd. So in cutting that, it is really going to challenge you. And I've been doing this a while. I would not suggest you start in white oak. Poplar. And the secret to poplar is, unlike all the other woods, the heartwood, the green part, is soft, and the sapwood, the white part, is actually hard. It's usually the other way around. So the green heartwood of poplar is really easy to cut. Really nice stuff. Pine. Most all cuts of pine, I don't have a piece of pine right here, but we'll grab this piece of cedar. Cedar is really easy. Now the advantage of this is it's going to allow you to work on your technique without having to develop the muscle control that will allow you to do this with some precision. Narrow piece. That's, oh my goodness, look at that. I can go full length in one stroke almost. So this is great stuff because here I am, I'm trying to learn how to start the saw, how to saw on an angle, how to saw perpendicular across the end. If I'm fighting with that piece of oak and it's fighting me on every stroke, in the process of trying to really learn how to master this thing, it's forcing me to put a lot more effort in. More effort, less control. Whereas with this stuff, I can come in here and do anything I need, and it just sails through the wood. I suggest to some folks that you even start with a piece of foam. Get this high density blue stuff. It's going to allow you to come in. This is crazy, but trust me, it allows you to come in.
Frick, you want to give this a try?
Frick, you could come.
Could you handle this?
Probably.
Now, you'll laugh, but you don't know how hard people have in learning to cut perpendicular across the end of the board. Practice with this until you can actually do it. Go in there and see how thin you can split. Oh, that's not going to hold.
Super Dave says he doesn't recommend using it for furniture, though.
Why did I not? I'm not surprised at that comment. Once you've gone in and get to the point where, okay, I got this is easy. Then you want to move to some pine or basswood. Then you move from past basswood up to a piece of poplar, and then you can move to walnut, and then into something hard like maple. Now this is actually a little bit tough because when this stuff grows, that spring wood, see how soft it is? That stuff is almost punky, but that little band right there of summer wood is really hard. So when you cut through it, it's just... Chiseling is almost impossible because in the effort it takes to push your chisel through that hard spring wood, through that hard summer wood, that punky softwood will actually crush. Makes a real mess. So the softer the wood and the more uniform, that's what I was getting at here. When you're cutting through bands of really hard summer wood and then really soft spring wood, it's not a very uniform cut. So Honduran mahogany is wonderful. The growth is so even spring and summer that when you saw through it, it's just, there's no change in the density. One of the reasons why oak is difficult is because there is such a change in the density from spring wood to summer wood. So hopefully that helps. And if you're having a problem with your saw, start with some styrofoam. Get the technique and then move up and develop the muscle. It doesn't take very long, but you got to be patient and you got to get the technique first. Good question. Thank you for asking.
We should turn around and...
Oh, so what I got behind me, just for your viewing pleasure, Super Dave. This is a piece of Vera wood from
Northern New York Vera wood.
Northern New York Vera wood. That's right. Beautiful wood, extremely heavy, yellowish. More of a yellow color like that when you first cut it. Oxidizes rapidly and it comes this beautiful emerald green. It's Jake's favorite wood. When Super Dave allows him. Yeah. It's very, very hard. This is a piece of, it's called Mexican rosewood, also known as catalox. Katalox. Very heavy, extremely heavy. In fact, heaviest one we work with?
Yeah.
Heavier than Vera?
Yeah, but I don't think it's as heavy as lignum.
But it is extremely heavy and hard. This is a piece of pink ivory, grows in Africa. Expensive. This piece of wood, as you can see by the price on the bottom, is $439. And this is the actual color. I haven't done anything to enhance it. Beautiful pink color. Very, very dense, very heavy. Polishes beautifully. One of the nicest properties of these close pores, very dense tropical woods is they polish unbelievably. This is a piece of moon ebony, so it's black and white. Interesting wood. This is a piece of Bacote. And it's oxidized a little bit, but that color is more yellow, and it's yellow and black, almost tiger stripe. This is a piece of walnut, both Claro walnut and English walnut. So you'll see there's a graft line right here where the two different species of trees have been grafted together. Now, you can't see it very well in log form, but when we actually process this at some point in the future, you'll see that line is where this is Claro walnut, that's English walnut. Makes for really interesting handles. Over here, we have a piece of maple. Now, this is some bird's eye, so you see the figure in it. But it's been torrefied. So they take this wood and they heat it up, cook it in an oven at a temperature that under normal circumstances would cause it to combust. But in the absence of oxygen, it doesn't burn. But it torrefies and it gets this beautiful aged patina. It also makes the wood almost waterproof. It will not absorb moisture. That makes it very stable. That also prevents it from rotting. My understanding is that this is something the Vikings discovered to preserve wood. If your wood can't take on moisture, it's not going to rot. And this is a piece of snakewood. Snakewood is listed as the most expensive of the exotic woods. That piece was $230. That little chunk came out of it. However, and it has this snakeskin look to it. The problem is that it's susceptible to cracking terribly when it dries. So I'm going to have a hard time finding a piece big enough out of there to get a handle, or some saw handles, without having cracks in it. And over here we have a piece of regular maple that has been torrefied. We use that for when we make our winding sticks, because you want your winding sticks to be stable. You do not want them to move once they've been built. So by making them out of torrefied maple, they should never have to be straightened after we've made them, which is a great feature. And that's a piece of holly out on the end. And holly, which is a beautiful wood in and of itself, even though it's extremely plain, it's just white. Here's a piece of holly. It grows in Maryland. Now it's a little bit dirty from being around the shop. It's another one of these, a very dense wood, very expensive as well, but pretty. Pretty when you contrast it. I think I'll build something someday that'll have holly drawer sides, something, a nice little cabinet. Gaboon, which is jet black. Gaboon ebony is what they use to make piano sharps. So gaboon fronts, and then holly sides, and it'll just be wow. What do we got down here?
I don't know, but grab that piece of moon. Or not moon, black and white.
Where?
Right behind you.
Oh, so this is another ebony. This is called black and white ebony. Unfortunately, we bought this not realizing we were being sold very damp wood, and it has moved and cracked so bad that we won't get anything out of that. Maybe some marking gauges, but certainly no saw handles. There are hundreds of harvestable timbers. I've got a big block of cocobolo here that's sitting there drying, or not drying, just acclimating. What else have we got in here? Oh, we have some stuff here, Jake, we forgot about.
Cocobolo.
So much wood, so little time. So here we have, these are some blanks we're going to make some saws out of. This is cocobolo. Cocobolo comes from Mexico and also Nicaragua, and it can have colors that range from black to purple to yellow,
Orange, red.
orange, yeah, all kinds of colors. This is a piece of desert ironwood, and really dense
Also known as
stuff.
poop wood.
Really dense stuff. It does stink, but very dense. But boy, does it ever polish up beautifully. I'm looking at this stuff and thinking, oh, I got to get back into making some more handles. Here's a really nice piece. Who's waiting for this? Somebody is.
No, I've already cut it.
Have you? Look at this. Look at the color of that emerald green. This is Vera wood. I can feel Dave salivating. Here's a piece of kingwood. Now, what I like about kingwood is it's almost purple. See that? I hope the camera shows. And then this is the sapwood, the outside of the tree. So this handle is going to have just a little bit of sapwood on the bottom of the horns. This is Arizona desert ironwood, but unfortunately there's a crack in it. We might be able to salvage that. What do we got over here? A piece of Paduke? Yeah. There's a piece of Paduke, which this isn't how you normally find my Paduke. Paduke tends to be orange, almost a hunter's orange. Oxidizes very rapidly. In fact, if you come over here, I'm going to show you. Back in 1987, I think, I built a blue rocking chair. What? Are you losing me, Frick?
Yep.
Can you still hear me?
Right now I can.
Bring it out.
I can right now.
I built this Maloof style rocking chair, and it was made out of Paduke. Well, Paduke is orange. You don't realize how orange it is. Let me see if I can open a piece of this up. Let's just hit this with the...
That looks pretty orange on the other side.
Yeah, I'm gonna peel a couple of strips off there. So there's your orange color. Can you imagine what this looked like when it was fresh? And then it loses all of that color. It oxidizes. And this was sapwood, and that was white, and that's grade. But when there was 4 of us in the class building chairs, And I would come in the middle of the night to work on it, but I could never leave my mess because everybody knew me. Orange dust everywhere. However, point of this lesson is just be aware of what it's going to look like and plan ahead. David Charlesworth told me of something he did one time that had string inlay. Spent a month building it. Very delicate string inlay. Unfortunately, in 3 or 4 years, it had oxidized to the point where you couldn't see any of the string inlay. So all of that effort was gone. So, choose carefully. Padauk.
Grab some of that bigger cocobolo at the bottom.
More desert ironwood. I forgot. This is all stuff that Ahmed sends us. Beautiful cocobolo. Oh, look at all the stuff I got. Oh, here's a piece of Shedua. I have not worked with Shedua for years. Last time I worked with Shedua was back in probably 88, 89. And it is a beautiful wood. That is going to make a fantastic handle when I get at that. By the way, just so that you know, I got to get out of the actual production. I have more important things to do. So by the end of March, I'm supposed to be out of production completely, and we've got that new shop, and my job is going to be developing new tools and making the one-offs so I can get caught up on making these beautiful saws. We put 5 up on the site the other day, and they disappeared within hours. So I know people want them, and I want to be able to make them. So that's coming. Here's some more cocobolo. Really pretty stuff. Beautiful wood. However, a lot of these exotics carry a downside, and that is the dust is almost toxic. For some people, it is toxic. In fact, the joke is that if you're not allergic to cocobolo dust, you just haven't worked it long enough. So there are people that can't even have it touch their skin, which is kind of a shame, but that's only as a result of exposure to the dust, I think. That's all more Padauk and more, that's all a big stash of kingwood. All kinds of such beautiful green. Oh, I just love that. That is such an incredible color. Anyway.
Okay, Frank.
I'm going to bore you watching me salivate over wood. Was that answered? Was that a question, or did we just get carried away?
No, you started talking about wood, and then...
we have got to find the chisels. People don't even know. Any donations tonight, Frick?
I haven't been keeping an eye on it. I got too much on my plate.
You're finished.
The dessert was good, too. All right, you ready for a question? Charles McBride would like to know.
Hi, Charles.
He's in the chat with us this evening. He says, I am struggling with moving after resawing thin stock on the bandsaw. Is there a formula or rule of thumb to know how much material to leave for squaring after resawing?
Oh. So resawing is a... by the way, that's a piece of English walnut, which I think is my favorite of all the walnuts. Resawing is one of those, I'll call it a head fake. You think, when I build a drawer, and the drawer side is only going to finish off at maybe 3/8 of an inch, and I think, well, I got all your lumber you buy 4/4, I can easily get 2 drawer sides from one piece. So you think you can go over to the bandsaw and split it. Why bandsaw? Well, narrower kerf. You're going to split it and have 2 pieces. The problem is wood has internal stress. So if I take this piece of Shedua and go over and cut that down the middle, I'm almost guaranteed that those 2 pieces are going to twist and bend and do some funky things. I'm far better off to sacrifice the what I would have thought I was going to save by taking off 1/4 of an inch on either side and using that 3/8 section in the middle. That's my guarantee. That's the closest thing to a guarantee of having a stable piece of wood. But taking off a bunch from one side to the other or opening it up down the middle, you're almost always asking for trouble. So the question is there a rule to follow in terms of how much am I going to have to leave in order to flatten a piece after resawing it? And I don't think there's any rule you can follow because it's grain specific. It could be species specific. It's definitely going to be moisture content specific. So there's so many factors that need to be accounted for. I would say my only advice is to err on the side of caution. So depending on how wide of a board, the wider the board, the more you're going to have to allow in order to get rid of that cup. So you just, leave lots, and hopefully it'll be enough. Not a very specific answer, but it's the best I can tell you. I'll also say that your best bet is to forget trying to be a wood miser, no pun intended, and use a single piece of thick wood to get that stable piece of thinner wood, as opposed to trying to split it and getting two. You almost always lose when you do that. Next question, Frick.
Okay, next question comes from CJ in Washington, D.C.
Hi, CJ.
He says, why is quarter-sawn wood more expensive, and when would it be worth going for it instead of normal sawn wood?
Well, true quarter-sawn wood takes a whole lot more time to saw in order for it to be done properly. I suppose you could also say too that if I had a log, I'm only going to get one piece that is actually quarter-sawn. So that cut right down through the middle on both sides of the center is my true quarter-sawn. Everything after that is going to be plain sawn. So simply a factor of supply and demand. Out of every log, you get one quarter-sawn board. So of course it's going to be more expensive. If you're trying to get maximum yield for quarter-sawn, then they're going to take that board, they're going to quarter it, they're going to half it, they're going to quarter it, and then they're going to make cuts. They don't get as much yield, but they're going to get more quarter-sawn lumber. So either way, it's going to be the more expensive of the two and harder to find. Most people that are milling and selling wood would rather get the maximum number of boards than to go in and sacrifice a lot of extra time and a certain amount of material to try to just get quarter-sawn boards. And most people want quarter-sawn boards either for the figure, which tends to be just straight lines, or the stability factor. Go ahead, Frick.
Where'd my question go? Oh, yeah. This one comes from Rob in Pennsylvania.
Hi, Rob.
He says, what have you found to be the best way to glue high oil content wood like teak rosewood, etc.?
Ooh. Well, people will talk about wiping it down with acetone. But you wipe down with acetone or lacquer thinner or any kind of a solvent, all you're doing is you're getting rid of the oil that's on the wood, on its surface. You're not getting rid of the oil that's down below, and it's essentially going to seep back into there. You really need to find a glue that will ignore that. And I don't know if I have ever conquered that issue. I'm trying to think of something. I try to avoid using exotic woods where you have to glue a couple pieces together. So if I'm building a box, it's one wide piece and you've got your dovetail. So when you glue two pieces of cocobolo together with a dovetailed corner, you have enough mechanical joint space. You have enough in terms of the mechanical aspects of the joint, along with the glue, that one helps the other. But when you're just simply gluing two cocobolo boards together like that, you're relying on the glue strength of that narrow joint on that oily wood, and that's risky at best. So you can try the wiping down, but I'm not convinced that that's going to save your bacon in the long run.
Would that marine boat glue work?
I don't know if that one would. There may be some Gorilla Glue might work. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I've not experimented with any of them to find out, but I'm sure somebody somewhere has come up with a glue that is okay or better. I've used cyanacrylate for small pieces, but I'm not convinced that cyanacrylate is the best solution for a glue long term in an area where you're relying strictly on glue strength. I use it to make my boxes, but that finger joint, you have all kinds of surface area and you've got the mechanical factors of the joint. So that's a different story. But to just use cyanacrylate glue to hold two boards together like that, I don't trust it long term. I've seen it fail too many times. Frick, next question.
Next question comes from Dave Potts in New Jersey.
Hi, Dave.
He says, what is your
Very
experience?
familiar name.
What is your experience with stabilized wood? Have you tried this resin stabilizing and dyeing process on your own?
No, but we use a lot of it. So Sean Mahaffey, friend of mine, provides us with, I'm over here, our blanks for making our mallets. So I'm going to answer 2 of your questions here. So these are for our small mallets. So that is a piece of maple. And what Sean does, he dries it. So you got to get it dry. You got to cook it in the oven, get it down to 0 moisture content. Then you put it in a container of whatever the resin is that they're using, and in a vacuum chamber. And the vacuum is going to cause all the air to come out of the wood, and something has to replace the air, and it pulls in the resin. And then as the resin dries, you end up with a piece of wood that weighs about 1.5 times, 1.5 to 1 3/4 times what it would otherwise. It does make for an interesting finish, because I use it on my handles. Where do we have one here? Is there one over here? It doesn't really take a finish after it's been resin impregnated. I don't have a sample here, sorry. Sold it. But it takes on a really high polish when you buff it up. So that's my experience with resin impregnated. This is what Sean does for us. This is resin impregnated purple infused maple. So they color that resin, and it pulls, so it goes all the way through the wood. So we've drilled a hole in there, and if you look in there, it's purple all the way through. Nice thing about that in terms of using anything purple is it's not going to fade. So it's going to be this purple color for a long time. Purple Heart, unlike this, will actually lose its color, lose its purple, and go back to being a kind of an ugly brown. Next, Frick.
Nick Tinling in Sacramento, California. He says,
Hi, Nick.
how thick can I make veneer and not worry about expansion?
How thick can you... Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Hold that thought just 1 second. My friend Moose from Pat's Secret Garden always donates 3 items of clothing that we draw for at the end of the night. This is our Captain hoodie. This is our famous Dead Cat sweater, which is the warmest garment I've ever put on. And we have our Naughty Girl t-shirt. If we draw your name, you just have to tell us what size, and we'll ship it out to you. You can all you have to do to enter the draw is just follow that little link on there, and no money has to change hands. If you'd like to donate to the Purple Heart Project, you're welcome to. Please do it through the link. It goes through our site, so we don't lose the fees that these other companies like YouTube would take. Question: how thick can I cut veneer before I worry about expansion problems? Now, what's really odd about trying to answer this is, if you look at a piece of Baltic birch, Jake, have I got a piece right here somewhere? Baltic birch. Oh yeah, I have right here. There. So here's a piece of Baltic birch plywood. What's different about Baltic birch or Russian birch is that most plywoods will use an expensive exterior veneer, very thin, and the core tends to be a very inexpensive wood, almost a weed. Baltic birch is the same birch on all of the plies. So this piece of birch is running this way, the next one is running this way, the next one is running this way, and that's how it goes. So they're crossing like this. So I suspect, because there is so much glue surface area, that somehow that stops it from moving. Almost flies in the face of everything I've told you. So Nick's question, it was Nick, right? Mm-hmm. Nick's question is, how thick can I cut that veneer before I run into problems? Well, if I made that veneer out of 3 pieces, if I made a piece of 1/2 inch veneer out of 3 pieces instead of, let me see how many I've got on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you can imagine the amount of glue surface there is on 9 pieces of veneer that total up a little less than 1/2 inch. If I would only make 3 pieces, in other words, 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there, I have much less, a whole lot less glue surface. Probably might end up with some problems there of the veneer, of the glue joint failing as it expanded and contracted. I'm building the I'm going to walk around this side. Right now we're building, in our online workshop, we're building the doors for this, for our tool cabinet. And I'm using, I don't like leaning stuff against this. Here's the panel. So this is very thick veneer, and it's only a 1/16 of an inch, but that's thick based on most veneers. And I don't expect any problem. And that veneer is being glued to a piece of MDF, which is not going to move at all, and yet I don't expect any problems with this. Maybe it's glue surface area as in relation to the thickness of the veneer that makes a difference. And I'm trusting it to the point where I'm gluing a solid band, a bird's eye band, all the way around. So if there's any movement at all, I'm going to lose my miter joints. We'll see what happens, but I don't anticipate a problem. Now, typical veneer might be as thin as a 1/64 of an inch or even thinner. I cut this up on the bandsaw just to play around with it, and that's kind of thick. I don't know whether I could do the same with veneer that thick or not. So I'm going to suggest that if you go much over a 1/16 of an inch, you might be entering into some troubled territory. Here's a piece of oak veneer. And I'm going to just show you the difference. I'll compare the two. What did I do with it? What did I do with that door I just had in my hand, Jake? Am I losing my... There it is. So here's a piece of commercial available plywood. You see the thickness of the veneer, and you see the thickness of my veneer. Quite a difference. They don't have any problems. I don't have any problems with this, but I don't think I would double that and feel safe. Let me know if you use thicker wood and you have a problem. Always nice to benefit from somebody else's experience. Next, Rick.
Next one comes from Matthew Michelli in New York. And he says, can you learn to fine woodwork with SPF lumber from big box stores?
Can you say that again, please?
Can you learn to fine woodwork to fine, like do the type of woodworking you do with SPF lumber from big box stores?
SPF?
That's what it says.
Now, SPF, I don't know what SPF stands
It
for.
must be. It
He's
might be
talking about
another term for
surface?
S4S.
Okay, so...
Spruce, SPF is an acronym for spruce, pine, and fir.
Oh.
Dimensional lumber
okay.
or engineered
All right.
wood.
So structural wood. Can you do fine woodworking with it? Well, it's not the prettiest stuff in the world when you're done. It does plane beautifully. In fact, I used to take really pretty woods to wood shows, and it just gets planed away during the weekend. And I said, this is crazy. So I started just taking a piece of 2x6. Actually, if I have a piece here, I'll demonstrate it for you. And it comes off like tissue paper, and it has a really interesting feel off of the hand plane. I don't know if I'd want to build a piece of furniture. I have. Back in my early days when I first started, I built our first bed out of 2x10s from the big box store. I've got a piece right here, and I'll show you. Just give me a second while I take the screws out of it. Jake, you can't set the camera down and go find those chisels, can you?
Yeah, I can.
Huh?
Yeah, I can.
Can you do that? Just park that somewhere. Frick, don't move and knock that over.
Yeah, it's on its way out anyway.
Yeah, I've been hearing that for how long? So this is a piece of probably spruce. That's what it looks like. Black spruce, which is what most of our forests are up here. Harvested for lumber. It didn't used to be, But now it has to be kiln-dried. And that was primarily for bugs, but also for stability. If you've ever been in an older home that was built before construction lumber was kiln-dried, you look down the hall and the wall goes like that because as the studs would dry out, they would twist, and not fun to have to go in and remodel after that. So I'm using my 5.5.
Forgot I put them somewhere safe.
You forgot you put them somewhere safe. Right here.
Jeez. Dummy.
So I'm going to plane this piece, but before I do, so here's what we're giving away tonight. So this is a custom ground half-blind dovetail chisel with a custom turned pink ivory handle. Thank you to Ahmed down in Southern California.
No catcalls.
Beautiful piece of wood. This is that same custom ground.
And that pink ivory is actually like that, right?
That's the color. That only thing that's on that is an oil, a clear finish to it.
Someone last week thought it was fake. So.
No, not fake.
They actually thought it was ivory
This is
tusks
a piece of
dyed
black wood.
pink.
So the purpose of that chisel, if you've never cut a half-blind dovetail where you have to get into the corner, so when you're hollowing out that socket where the tail goes, you use your half-blind to allow you to get into those corners. In other words, you have to use either a pair of skew chisels or a straight chisel, and it's very difficult. You're trying to drive a square-ended chisel into a angled corner. It doesn't work very well. All right, so here's our piece of spruce. Now, this is your only option. Well, then you'd use what you can use. I'd rather use wood than styrofoam. This is terribly twisted. Get rid of that bump in the middle. It's really fun wood to plane, and you'll see why once I get it flat. And the feel, after you've gone over it with a plane, that is smooth as silk. And as you start to take a really thin shaving, it's crinkly. So we would get a great big long piece, and we would pull off these 4-foot super thin shavings, and they would just flutter about the room. Kevin Burris would be up there doing that with us. Super Dave.
Would be watching him.
Watching, drooling. How'd you do that, Kev? And they float really well because they don't have a tendency to roll up like a regular shaving does. See if I can get it a little bit thinner. And the best part is I get to entertain the patrons all weekend long for $1, as opposed to planing off pieces of yellow cedar that cost me an arm and a leg. Next question.
All right.
Don't forget your wax. This is sponsored by Rob's Magic Wax.
The next question comes from Eric Berry.
Hi, Eric.
He says, "Have you ever used cottonwood? Can you comment on its
Yes,
strengths
I
and
have.
comment on its strengths and weaknesses?"
Yep. So cottonwood. Let me sit here for a minute. Cottonwood grows in the western states, so you'd always find it along the rivers, and it grows big, huge, wide, large diameter trees, but extremely weak. A very light wood. Sometimes cottonwood has the most incredible color inside it. I've seen it pink and red, but it's not a very strong wood. And I don't know if I'd want to build a piece of furniture out of it. I suppose, again, if it's all you have, it's all you have. But huge, huge trees and grows rather rapidly. Always lines the rivers. It must need a lot of moisture. Next.
Okay, next one comes from John Root. And he says...
Hey, John, where's he from?
It doesn't say. He's in the chat. He says, since so many woods change colors when they oxidize, is there any way to minimize the change?
So remind me to talk about pine on that. Yeah. So there are spar varnishes, which have a lot of UV protection in them, particularly for use on in marine applications on boats. But nothing is ever going to beat the power of the sun. Those UV rays, you think about what they, when they make a tar and gravel roof, to protect the tar, they put gravel rocks on it, and that's what allows the tar to last as long as it does. Look at your asphalt. Asphalt's black, and the next thing you know, you turn around and it's light gray because it just gets bleached by the sun. So all of your woods, that's going to happen to. But let me tell you what I know about wet woods. The walnuts, that walnut doesn't look anything compared to what it looked like. In fact, I just refinished this. So if you look at how nice and brown that is compared to this face, I didn't redo these. So that's what this looks like after, how old is this thing? 33, 34 years. So, and here's another example. That ash was the same. So the ash that is typically nice and white, yellows like that. In fact, it looks like these two colors are almost going to end up being the same shade pretty soon. But at one point, there was a nice contrast that you have between the two ends. I resurfaced the outside surfaces. This surface, this edge, this surface. I didn't touch these. So all the blonde woods, maple, birch, ash, are all going to yellow. Your dark woods, mahogany. Actually, mahogany is probably an exception to the rule, because mahogany, which is a reddish brown, is just going to keep getting a deeper and deeper reddish brown. I haven't seen mahogany bleach out. Walnut is going to get a gray brown, and it loses its appeal, unfortunately.
Do the blondish woods, is it the finish that yellows, or is it the wood?
The wood, because we'll go around the shop and find some blonde wood that's been sitting there with no finish on it. The finish is probably going to contribute to that a little bit as well, but the wood itself is going to do that. I was just about to tell you something. Oh, cherry. So everybody says, yeah, but cherry gets better. Cherry, when you first work it, is almost a flesh pink, and then it gets a beautiful crimson reddish color. But can we go around and look? Check.
No.
Well, out here, I have a clock.
Wait, I can go out and look, but you can't.
You go look. I'll stand here and just tell you.
You narrate.
So this clock, grandfather clock, has been sitting in our living room for probably 20 years. And as a result, that cherry has been completely bleached out by the sun to where at a distance, in fact, if I'm standing back here looking at it and I'm contrasting that cherry clock to that pine wall, and it looks the exact same color. But certainly it would never look like that when it's new. And if you look at that little end table right there, it's been sitting in my mother's house. Oh, by the way, hello, Mom. She's supposed to be watching tonight. That's Diane. That cherry table that she's probably saying, that's mine, I want it back. It really isn't, but I loaned it to her. She's had what do they call it, a doily? Or something sitting right here, so you can see where the light has preserved the color here, but out here on the edges, it's bleached to a point where it's lost its nice color. So cherry does not survive, contrary to what people think. There is one wood that I can think of, and mahogany might be another example. Pine gets honey patina that just gets better over time. It's the one wood I think that really gets better with age. And if you're having to live with your furniture and you have children, they're going to beat it up regardless of what you do. Pine is that one wood that seems to look okay when it's received a few dings in life. Now, what's going to happen here? Ebony's not going to change. It's black now. It's going to be black then. So that's an exception. The pink ivory, that's going to lose some of that nice pink. The Vera wood, I haven't had Vera wood long enough to know what's going to happen. It oxidizes really rapidly from the yellow when you cut it to the green like this, but I would suspect that it'll get darker. And the rest of these, most of your exotic woods, Cocobolo is going to get really dark. Padauk, you've seen from the example over here. I would love to just skim off that surface to show you. It would almost look like the chair was bleeding because of the way it would come out orange, contrasted to that color that it is. So I don't think there's any way to prevent woods from oxidizing. Frick, next.
Kevin Samira is on.
Hey, Kev.
Well, just
Brother.
wanted to add that. Next question comes from MB. It's the username. And he or she says, is Alaskan yellow cedar a good choice for a pergola or outdoor project? Is it stable wood or does it tend to twist, cup, etc.?
I wonder if they're talking about the same as... So if your Alaskan yellow cedar is the same yellow cedar that we get from BC, which not expensive there, very expensive here. I don't know what... I can't afford to build any outdoor furniture with that. It's too pricey. Most cedars are good for outdoor use because they seem to have a natural ability to resist rot. I know we use native cedar here for decks, and you get a lot more life out of it than you would fir or spruce. What was I going to say? Western red cedar also has that natural resistance to rot and decay. Our native cedar, it's very difficult to get a big tree that isn't already hollowed out by rot on the inside. But if you get it before it rots, it has a natural tendency to avoid it. As far as twisting, you're putting a piece of wood into an environment where it's going to be wet and dry, two extremes. And if you think about a piece of wood, I would say that the sun is probably going to do more damage to it. Just having the sun beating on it all that time, it's going to crack open the surface and make it very rough. That's what happens to your decks, and they get very splintery, and it's all because of the sun, not the moisture. So, don't know.
Is there a specific finish that you would use for outdoor furniture?
I don't do enough outdoor furniture to answer that with any kind of expertise. But there are there are several finishes that are designed specifically for outdoor use. I still think anytime you're dealing with, you look at the paint on exterior surfaces. Now, whether they do it so they'll have you keep coming back every 2 years, I don't know. But what paint or any kind of finish that has ever been able to stay on a piece of wood outside for any amount of time without having to be redone constantly? And I think it's the same, because if you've ever had a clear finish on any boat woodwork, that has a tendency to peel and crack and has to be redone all the time. So,
would that be because the wood expands and whatever's covering it is not expanding?
No, because most of those finishes are somewhat elastic and they'll move with it a little bit. I'm convinced it's just the sunlight. It's the UV damage that occurs. It causes you to get skin cancer and it destroys your wood. Stay inside. Next, Rick.
Next one comes from Rick Melcher in Warminster, Pennsylvania. He says, which types of wood exhibit the least change from moisture?
I'm going to refer you to Bruce Hoadley's book on that one again. From my own experience, I can't really say that there's enough of a difference. If I was going to build something, it was going into my house, and I really had to make sure it was going to be super stable, I can't think of any wood that would be an outlier. It's all going to move, and it's going to move in so close to the same amount. What you find is that there are woods that will have a tendency to move a whole lot more, coming from 20% down to 8%. But going from 7 to 9 or 8 to 10, the movement is not going to vary enough from one species to another to really point it and say, well, this one's going to be more stable.
Well, why don't you talk about the woods that move the least in moving from 20 to 8?
Yeah, well, I don't know those. That's what I say. You got to go and look at
Well, I mean,
Hoadley's book. Here's
When you
here's a
compare
good
birch
example.
to maple,
When in building a workbench, you want something to be as stable as possible. So we use maple. It's nice and hard. It's very resistant to dents. But that bench is already no longer flat. It was at one point, and I've got to go in. I'm avoiding it. I've got to go in and reflatten that bench top. So, and our shop, this humidity and temperature stays the same year round. So, you know, you're dealing with a material that is always going to be trying to achieve equilibrium, and it just, to keep us on our toes, it's constantly moving. So you have to build around that. And that's the single biggest challenge in woodwork, is building around and building with an unstable material such that you can keep it together without confining it and restricting its wanting to move, expand, and contract. It's a tough one. Frick?
Okay, next one comes from John Heron. He's in the chat.
Hey, John.
He says, I have a cherry table that is over 100 years old and is really dark.
Happy birthday. And
He
what?
He says
It's really dark?
It's really dark. How does that fit into your aging?
Well, that piece of furniture that I showed you out there, we have a vaulted ceiling in our living room, so it's all glass, and the light just pours in there. Our hardwood floor, which is oak, is all bleached out. That piece of cherry is all bleached out, and all the furniture in that room has been bleached out. So if it's not exposed to as much light, then it's going to stay, that cherry is going to stay dark a lot longer. Now here's another possibility. Furniture manufacturers, to try to even out the color, when your furniture manufacturers are trying to appease or appeal to the public, which know very little about wood. So they think all pieces of walnut look the same, all pieces of oak look the same. We know that's not true. For instance, of the oak that is sold in the United States as either white oak or red oak, there are 50 species of oak, and they're all classed as either red oak or white oak. So there's going to be variation. So what the furniture manufacturers will do is they make it out of walnut, but then they'll put a walnut stain, and it'll even out the tone. It'll also help preserve the color. So that cherry may very well have had cherry stain put on it that would protect it from bleaching. So if you want a solution on how do I keep my wood from changing color, experiment with a stain that will enhance. I don't like to use poplar and stain it to look like walnut. I never have done that. If you want dark wood, dark furniture, use dark wood. You want light furniture, use light wood. Now that's not the same. That's okay with the darker woods, but what would you do to keep a piece of maple from yellowing? I don't think you can do anything, but you can certainly use a cherry stain on cherry, and that'll keep it that color much longer. That may very well have been the case with your piece of 100-year-old cherry furniture. Next, Frick.
Okay, next one comes from...
Should we say hello to Mickey?
Say hi.
Mickey is Frick's youngest of 4. He is 2?
2 years old.
2 years old.
Yeah. Okay, next question comes from Philippe in the Philippines.
Hey, Philippe.
Oh, sorry, my microphone was off. He says, how is
I know about this much Tagalog.
How is the best way to smooth a wide long board when it is already dimensioned to its thickness? Does this method apply to different kinds of wood since their properties are somewhat different?
Okay, you're going to have to read the first part of that for me again. How do we smooth?
How is the best way to smooth a wide long board when it is already...
Okay, so you've got a long wide board that is already down to 3/4 of an inch, and you want to smooth it. Well, the problem with planing is going to demand that the wood be flatter than... Let me explain this. Back up a little bit. If I have a long piece of wood that's not perfectly flat, I can go in and I can sand it smooth without changing the dimension. If I have a long piece of wood and I want it smooth with a plane, even using a smoother, I'm going to have to take off a certain amount of wood, because an area about, if I'm using a smoother, every 1.5 feet is going to have to be pretty flat in order for that smoother to take a shaving. If there's a little bit of a hollow over 6 inches, in order for that plane to touch all that wood, you're going to have to drop the outside ridge of that hollow in order to get down in and to smooth the bottom. So hand plane, you're going to lose some thickness. Sanding, you're not going to lose some thickness. So if it's critical, you're going to have to sand. If you can afford a little bit, you can plane it. And what was the second part of that question?
Does it apply to all species?
Oh, yeah. It's not species specific. It's how flat is the board to begin with. Next.
Alexander Holt in Tacoma, Washington.
Alexander. Haven't been to Tacoma in a while, but I'm usually there once or twice a year.
He says, what is the best way to dry out wood if it gets rained on? I live in the Pacific Northwest where rain is a constant thing.
Okay, so in drying a piece of wood, there's free water and bound water. I got to remember way back into my botany class to explain this, but when you cut down a tree and you are drying it to stabilize it, you're not only getting rid of the free water, but you're getting rid of the bound water, which is actually in the cell wall. And that's the stuff that's harder to get rid of. So if I take a piece of wood and it gets rained on, I can dry that piece of wood out and I'm good. But that if I take a piece of wood that's been freshly cut and take it in and try to dry it out, that's going to take a long time in order to get rid of that bound water. So surface gets wet, it's going to affect the wood a little bit, but it'll dry out relatively quickly and no harm done. Except I shouldn't say that because remember the benches that Mike had got caught in the rain. Give you a quick story. We were borrowing a bunch of Schoberg benches, which are made out of European beech. We were borrowing them to teach a class up in Ontario, and they were coming from a school, and I think there was 8 of them. They'd load them on an open trailer, nice clear day. In the time it took to drive from the classroom, from the school to where we were teaching, a shower came on and poured down. These benches got soaked. We got them there, they dried them off as quick as they possible, got them inside. Well, they just turned into a washboard. And we had to take them all apart, take them to a local cabinet shop that had a thickness sander, and run them all through the thickness sander to get them down to where they were flat again. So that was partially due to the fact that those benches are typically made up of multiple pieces that are glued together. But I would think that if you had a piece of wood like that and it got rained on, you could bring it in, dry it out, and within a day or two, it's back to where it was. Free water versus bound water. Look it up. It's an interesting topic. Next.
We're all done.
We're done?
Yeah, wrap it up. I'm just putting the draw names together.
Oh, you mean it's 9 o'clock?
It is.
3:59.
Oh, wow. Well, that was fun. So how many draws are we doing?
Last time Megan checked in, she said we just hit 3,000, so...
Oh, good. So we got to make another chisel, Jake.
Well, we have those other handles.
Okay. So we're going to draw for 3 chisels. We'll add one into the mix. You tell us which one you want. No, actually, no. We'll do that one and we'll give it away. Then we'll draw for that one and we'll give it away. We're giving away a hoodie. Captain's always right. And on the small print, so your wife doesn't see it, it says, and I'm the captain. We're giving away the famous Dead Cat sweater, warmest garment you'll ever put on, and a Naughty Girl sweater once modeled by no one other than Frick.
Broken in the chest area.
So we'll give away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 prizes tonight, right? You
Sure.
good?
No, give me a second. You may as well wrap it up and...
All right, so I will say, Kim, you want to come in? Thanks to Frick. I think we went snafu free tonight.
I believe so, yeah.
Thanks to Jake behind the camera. We got a new camera coming. Hopefully you'll notice an improvement. And we're going to have it ready for in 2 weeks.
Willie took the stuff
Oh,
to be
yeah.
welded.
Our magician, Willie, our fabricator, had to make something for Jake in order for his harness to work properly. Thanks for Rex for keeping little Junior. Get him on the camera, Jake.
El Junior?
Hey,
Hey, El Junior.
you're bigger than me. So this, no, he doesn't like me. Do you like my come? No? I have treats. Oh, yeah, sure. So this is McLaren. Wave. How old are you, McLaren?
4.
Yeah, 4?
Yeah.
Do you lie much? Do you have any brothers? Yeah. Clarence, 2. Thank you for Luther for answering the questions. Super Dave for being on there, keeping us in good humor. Ken's been on there as well. And I think Megan was on.
Megan's been helping out with the vets.
Megan's been keeping track of all
donations.
the vets. Yep. Any vets to shout out to that we didn't?
I didn't. Oh, wait, no. No. Just the donations.
Special hello to Bob and Herman if they're viewing tonight. Always great to know that they're on there. Herman and Bob are both World War II vets that we featured a while back. So if you want, go back and check out some of our earlier live events, and you'll see what we did with those. It was pretty incredible. Thanks for Luther for doing that.
All right, we ready?
Yeah.
How many are we doing?
We're giving away 1, 2, 3, 6.
All right.
So the first one is going to, we'll give away the Captain's Always Right hoodie first. Who's that going to?
That is going to David Bruce Gochenor in Kansas.
Hey, David, congratulations. By the way, how many do we have on tonight?
We actually broke 1,000 at one point.
That's good.
We're at, 978 right now.
Okay. The next one will be the Naughty Girl sweater shirt.
It's going to Nikki D.
Nikki D.
in Netherlands.
Oh.
That's all I have for a name.
Hey, Nikki in Netherlands.
Okay.
And now the Dead Cat sweater.
Is going to Ted Branton in Alberta.
Oh, good place to have a Dead Cat sweater. Ted, you'll be the envy of the entire town.
All right.
Now, the first one we'll give away will be the African Blackwood half-blind dovetail chisel. By the way, these are valued at what, Jake?
$190.
$190 with that handle?
$200.
So the African Blackwood half-blind chisel is going to?
It is going to Joseph Bushnell in the United States. Doesn't say where specifically, but...
Congratulations, Joseph. And now the pink ivory half-blind dovetail chisel.
That one is going to Benjamin Robson in Ireland.
Hi, Benjamin, all the way over in Ireland. And
He's probably watching the Conor McGregor fight tonight. I know I will be. All right, last one.
The last half-blind dovetail chisel, any idea what the handle's going to be, Jake? Do we have one right here that we can commit to?
Pick a handle.
Where are they?
Where are they?
These ones?
There's Macassar. Macassar might be good.
Where's the Macassar?
Here.
Macassar ebony, that would make a nice handle. Okay, Macassar ebony handle on a half-blind chisel.
Half-inch, half-blind.
Half-inch, half-blind. Who's it going to, Frick?
It is going to Michael Martin in Astoria, Illinois.
Hey, Michael, congratulations. Now, just so you'll know, we finally got our shipment back of our little samples of maple syrup. So if you place an order, you'll find a little, enough for 1 or 2 pancakes.
If you place an order that goes in a box.
You're right. If your order ships in a box, we always send one of these to say thank you. We haven't had them for a long time. Like that, Mickey? And our maple butter, we just got restocked with maple butter. If you've never tried this, gamble. You'll love it.
A couple people said it's really good on
It's on everything.
on muffins, cornmeal muffins, and cornmeal
Maple
muffins.
butter will make anything good. And there's something else that we haven't made. We're not quite ready for the announcement, but we had prints made of that painting of Jesse, the 2 J's, that we're going to make available. That'll come out soon. And there's something else that I can't remember, but watch for some new stuff coming real soon. What are you saying?
He likes maple syrup
You selling that?
and maple butter.
Those are free. Yes, he loves maple butter. Do you like maple butter?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good night, Mom. And thank you for viewing, folks. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another topic. Watch your newsletter. Have a good year. We got more kids that wanting to come in.
Butter.
You said maple butter?